Hi, good evening and welcome to this episode of the Late Night Intercourse with Chioma. And of course, you know that your host is Chioma Onyenucheya-Uko, otherwise known as the Zest Family Lawyer. So tonight we'll be discussing child custody. And I hope you're not wondering why the choice of that topic. Well, as many of us know, matters that affect children or the custody of a child is usually central in conversations around, spousal relationships, especially when there is a problem or a crack in the marriage. So in having this conversation, I hope that we'll be able to learn one or two things about the things to consider if any of us if caught up in a situation where the custody of a child becomes an issue. And of course, why so? Because really, when things go south between a couple, the court must make a pronouncement on who keeps a child. There is no way you're going to tear that child into two for both of them to keep a piece of the child each, right? So it means that we must decide. And when I say we, I mean the couple or whoever else is involved in making that decision. A decision must be reached on who gets to keep this child or the children. What should be the things fueling the considerations on who keeps the child? Should it matter whether or not one of the parties feel aggrieved and then thinks that this should be an opportunity to punish the other or, generally just use the child as a bait or as a trophy against the other? Of course, it shouldn't be. Children are precious gifts. And in anything that concerns children, all the court is focused on, and what every right-thinking person should be focused on, is the best interest of the child. It shouldn't be a time to, start thinking of how to punish a spouse who disappointed one. It shouldn't be a time to start thinking of how to use custody of the child as something with which to gain a win or a triumph or an upper hand over a spouse. No at all. It shouldn't be. The focus, the singular focus, should be what is in the best interest of this child. And in line with that, let me share some of the things the court consider in arriving at that decision. One of which will be the welfare of the child. And by welfare, what are we talking about? What are the things that are appropriate that will help that child in wholesome development? The court will look at the age of the child. The court will look at, maybe the gender of the child. The court will look at things like maybe where the child have a special need and those other kind of things. Because it is in those considerations that the court will be able to arrive at a decision as to who exactly is better suited between the parties to take care of these interests and ensure the child's welfare. Then, of course, if the child is of an age where the child can make intelligent, decisions, the court may also consider who the child feels more emotionally attached to. So between the parties, who would the child rather be with? I am not saying that this is a primary consideration, because while also thinking of this, the court would usually not reach a decision based only on that if the court is not convinced that the person the child wants to be with is actually in the best interest of the child. But then again, it's one of the considerations. Then the other thing would be something like, the child's religious or cultural backgrounds. And by that, it means that the court would usually look to ensure that, whoever has custody of the child does not disrupt the child's continuous development, considering his or her cultural and religious backgrounds. So I think one of the things to consider right now is when you say yes, when you say I do to that person who is not of the same religion with you or who is of a different cultural background with you, be mindful of possible implications. Of course, we're not saying that things will go south. We hope not. But then again, we've seen situations where life happened, and perchance life happens. What can be the implication of that on your chances of custody of the child or the children of the marriage? So it means that the court may also consider to ensure that whoever has custody of the child does not disrupt the child's continuous development on the child's religious or cultural orientations and beliefs. Then the court would also look at the antecedents, the conduct, the behavior of parties. So what it means is that if either of the spouse or anybody else contending for the custody of a child is shown to be someone who has bad character, somebody who is an addict to a substance or to alcohol, someone who exhibits violent tendencies, or someone who has perpetrated some domestic violence, those kind of traits, any of those kind of negative behaviors, someone who is maybe promiscuous and things like that, if the court sees the signs that any of the parties is of such a conduct, it may weaken the person's chances of having custody of a child. And this is because, like I had said earlier, the focus of the court remains the best interest of the child, which means that the court wants to be sure the child continues to enjoy wholesome development. So anything that will impact negatively or set the wrong tone or the wrong path for the child in behavioral development, the court will want to get against such a thing. Then, of course, the court will also consider maybe living conditions, which means that while it is also not something the court considers without seeing the fuller pictures, the court wants to be sure that the living arrangement or the living condition of the party seeking to have custody of a child is stable enough to also help the child enjoy uninterrupted or stable development. So if the party seeking to have custody of the child leads a vagabond life, is on the move all the time, I'm not saying that responsible movements will be countenanced strongly by the court. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the court wants to just be sure that the person is stable enough, have decent living quarters, has a decent and stable living arrangement, such that the child does not have to suffer disruptions in his or her family life. Then the court will also look at something around the financial capacity of parties seeking to have custody. And this is one of the challenges a lot of women have. Of course, that doesn't mean that it is also a restrictive provision, in the sense that even where a party doesn't have financial capacity, but the court sees that on many other parameters that it is in the best interest of a child to be in the custody of that party, the court is likely to, make orders that will compel the party with financial capacity to support the party without financial capacity. But of a general application, the court wants to be sure that that child will continue to live in such conditions that will not depart from conditions he or she is previously accustomed to by the manner the parties have already raised them. So it means that if this child has been used to living in some level of comfort, the court wants to be sure that the party seeking custody is willing and able to continue to maintain such comfort to the child. So these are all the considerations that the court would usually look at. And as a firm advice, I would like to ask that whenever anybody is caught up in a situation where the custody of a child becomes a subject and issue, please, let's do away with animosity. Let's ignore the pains, the hurt, and all of the things that the party has done, our spouse or that other person has done to us. Let us be single-minded on what is best for the child. Because even if you have custody of that child, in maximum about 18 years or thereabout, that child would come of age and be able to make informed decisions as to who he or she would rather be with. And you don't want to lose the affection of your child because of a rash decision you made in a moment of anger. So, from the Zast family lawyer, this is me asking, that we are mindful to ensure that at all times we uphold the best interest of a child. So tell me, is there something you have learned from this conversation today? Are there questions you have? Is there something you'd want for me to clarify on this conversation topic? Please feel free to ask your questions in the comment section, and I promise I'll be more than happy to respond to them. And if there are any other conversation topics that you would rather we take on here, also feel free to come forward with them. And I promise you, I'll give you an enlightening time on any such topic. So, thank you very much for keeping my company tonight and being with me on the late night intercourse. I'll be expecting to have you with me again, same time, same channel. And of course, it is fondly yours, the Zest family lawyer, Chioma Onyenucheya-Uko. Thank you and good night.